just for what it's worth, man, I think Kirby Smart is Will Muschamp with a better roster. I've said that on Twitter before. And hey, like I said, is he a little bit better of a coach? Sure. But people talk about what if Kirby came to Carolina. I think it'd have been the same result. I'll be totally honest with you, man. I think it would have been. You bring up something really interesting before we get to the Gamecock specific side of things, Mike. I want to ask you this because, I was fortunate enough during the coaching search after, currently to talk with a lot of former Gamecock football players and alumni, and everybody wanted Shane Beamer, right? Like you mentioned, if you're not a South Carolina fan, you don't understand. It's a unique job. It's a unique challenge. But I want to ask you this, and some people may not like me for asking you this, but you mentioned the Nick Saban blueprint thing, and that became a thing. We saw it kind of start in the mid 2010s, and basically it was like, hey, you coach under Nick Saban, you get a job. You get a job. It's like Oprah Winfrey just handing out jobs in the SEC, right? And we all kind of figured out, like, at some point, like, okay, just because you coached under Saban does not mean you are Nick Saban. Now, I ask you this because I've heard a lot of comparisons this offseason, again, mostly coming from South Carolina people, but the new age of coach, if you will, is, oh, he is a CEO type, right? And a lot of South Carolina people draw comparisons to that idiot in the upstate that you mentioned. I feel like that's a little bit of a slippery slope. And as a South Carolina fan, it makes me cringe when Gamecock fans and alumni especially try to justify the hire by comparing him to that idiot in the upstate. Do you think that that model has real weight to hold, like, in the future? Like, do you think that coaches, I mean, there's more than one way to do it, but do you think that coaches, I think we all agree, like being Bobby Knight, you can't be that type of coach anymore with today's athlete. But do you think there's real weight to hold there in regards to that is the future of coaching, where you need to be that CEO type and kind of let your coaches do their thing? Because we understand the shortcomings of Will Muschamp, and we heard things about, he always had his hands in the offense. He couldn't just let his guys do their thing, whatever. Do you think there's real weight to be held there? Or, like, what are your overall thoughts on that? Because when I hear that, as far as, like I said, from alumni and fans and everybody, it's like, man, like, I understand where you're coming from. And I agree with the model, but it's just, it makes me cringe hearing people compare this situation to that situation.
Well, I think it really just depends on the coach and the situation because, I like Lincoln Riley and what he's doing in Oklahoma, but I wouldn't call him a CEO. I'd call him, outstanding offensive coach and play caller. And I would kind of go the same route with Dan Mullen. If you can get a guy like that, if you can get an Urban Meyer, yeah, you go in that direction. But there's just a lot of merit to getting that CEO type, particularly a real young guy like Shane Beamer, because he's going to attack the recruiting trail like it needs to be attacked for the Gamecocks to get back into contention in the SEC. But the trappings with that, I think we just look at LSU last year. I think they made a really poor decision at defensive coordinator with Bo Pelini, and it blew up in their face. And here we are a year later, after LSU had to replace both coordinators, they got to do it again.
Yeah.
And how many times is that going to work? And I mentioned Sam Pittman because I love the coordinator hires he made with Barry Odom and Kendall Briles. But the more progress Arkansas makes, the more likely those guys are going to leave, either to become head coaches or maybe to take over at a place like Alabama or LSU to be offensive or defensive coordinator. So then you're in the same spot again where you're kind of reliant on the coordinators you hire. So, it's kind of like a double-edged sword. But that's another thing that I like about Shane Beamer is just he's been all over the coaching ranks. We all know the connection with his dad. That opens a lot of doors, throughout his youth. And, to his own credit, it's not like he coached his entire career at Virginia Tech. He went down to Georgia and Oklahoma and Tennessee and on and on and on. So he made his own connections. And I think that'll serve South Carolina well in the years to come if they lose one or more coordinators to head coaching ranks.